Daniel had always dreamed of living a life far away from the noise and rush of the city. Ever since he was a child, he had loved stories of wide-open spaces, rolling fields, and the quiet rhythm of life on a ranch. As he grew older, that dream never faded. While his friends sought success in high-rise offices and crowded streets, Daniel longed for peace, fresh air, and the satisfaction of working with the land and animals. There was something pure about the idea of owning a ranch, a place where hard work met real reward, and where every day brought a new challenge and a new accomplishment. For years, Daniel worked tirelessly in the city. He had a steady job that paid well, but each paycheck reminded him that his true dream lay elsewhere. He spent evenings researching ranches, learning about soil types, livestock care, and water management. He read about fencing, barns, and pastures, imagining how he would repair, maintain, and nurture each part of a ranch. While his colleagues were busy chasing promotions, Daniel was carefully saving money, cutting unnecessary expenses, and planning the moment when he could finally leave city life behind. When he finally found a ranch for sale on the outskirts of a small town, Daniel felt a surge of excitement that was impossible to describe. The property was not perfect. In fact, it was far from it. The fences were old and broken, the barn had parts that were barely standing, and weeds had overtaken much of the land. The house needed repairs, and some areas had been neglected for years. Yet, Daniel saw past the imperfections. To him, this was more than just a piece of land. It was an opportunity to create something real, something lasting, and something entirely his own. He could almost see it in his mind. Green fields swaying in the wind, livestock grazing calmly, and a home filled with warmth and life. Buying the ranch was not easy. Daniel had to negotiate, secure financing, and make sure the property was a good investment. There were moments of doubt, moments when he wondered if he was making the right decision. But every time he walked the property, every time he imagined the future he wanted to build, his doubts melted away. He finally signed the papers, handed over the keys, and officially became the owner of the ranch. It was a day full of pride, relief, and anticipation, a day he had dreamed of for as long as he could remember. Moving to the ranch was a challenge in itself. Daniel had to leave behind the comfort of city life, the familiarity of routine, and the convenience of modern amenities. The first few days were overwhelming. The house was dusty and filled with the smell of old wood. The fields were wild and overgrown, and the tasks seemed endless. He had to clean, repair, and organize everything, often from sunrise to sunset. There were moments when he felt exhausted and unsure if he could handle the workload. Yet, there was also a strange joy in the hard work. Each nail he hammered, each fence he fixed, and each field he cleared brought a small sense of accomplishment that he had never experienced in the city. Daniel quickly realized that owning a ranch was not just about having land, it was about responsibility. Every decision mattered, from the care of the livestock to the health of the crops. Water had to be managed carefully. Equipment needed constant maintenance, and animals required attention day and night. There was no such thing as a day off. When nature demanded care, it was exhausting, but Daniel loved it. The challenges forced him to learn new skills, to be patient, and to think ahead. He discovered the satisfaction that comes from seeing results directly connected to his own hard work. One of Daniel's first priorities was the livestock. He had grown up around animals but had never taken full responsibility for them. The first day he entered the barn, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The cows were curious, the horses restless, and the chickens noisy and scattered. Daniel spent hours observing, learning their habits, and figuring out how to care for them. He realized that animals were not just part of the farm, they were living beings who required attention, care, and understanding. Feeding them, cleaning their spaces, and ensuring their safety became a daily ritual, one that Daniel grew to love deeply. Working the land itself was another learning experience. Fields that had been neglected for years were filled with weeds, uneven soil, and old roots. Daniel had to learn about irrigation, soil management, and crop rotation. He experimented with different methods, sometimes succeeding and sometimes failing. There were days when the sun beat down on him, leaving him tired and sore, and days when heavy rain or wind ruined weeks of work. But each setback taught him something new. He learned to be resilient, to plan better, and to appreciate the slow, steady progress that comes from patience and effort. Despite the hard work, Daniel found moments of beauty and peace that made everything worthwhile. Early mornings on the ranch were magical. The sky would lighten slowly, birds chirping, dew on the grass, and the soft sounds of livestock waking up. Daniel often took these moments to walk through the fields, breathe in the fresh air, and reflect on how far he had come. There was a sense of freedom in the vast open spaces, a feeling that the land was alive and that he was a part of it. It was a life filled with purpose, where every day brought something new to learn and appreciate. As weeks turned into months, Daniel began to see small successes. The fences were repaired, the barn was sturdy, and the animals were healthy and thriving. Crops started to grow in the fields he had worked so hard to prepare. Each achievement, no matter how small, filled him with pride. He realized that the dream he had nurtured for so long was now becoming reality. The ranch was no longer just a plot of land, it was his life, his work, and his sanctuary. Daniel also learned the importance of community. Neighbors who had been ranchers for generations offered advice, shared stories, and sometimes even lent a helping hand. Daniel discovered that ranch life was not just about solitude, it was about connection, working with others, sharing experiences, and learning from those who had walked the same path made the journey richer and more fulfilling. He began to feel a sense of belonging, not just to the land, but to the people around him. By the end of the first year, Daniel had transformed not only the ranch, but also himself. He had grown stronger, wiser, and more patient. He had learned that dreams are not realized overnight, and that hard work, dedication, and love for what you do are essential for success. The ranch had become a living symbol of his determination and perseverance, a place where he could create, nurture, and grow. Daniel often reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the long nights of planning, the sacrifices he had made, and the moments of doubt. Each memory reminded him of the courage it took to follow his dream. And while the work was far from over, Daniel knew that he had made the right choice. The ranch was no longer just a goal. It was a life filled with challenges, beauty, and purpose. As he stood on a hill one evening, watching the sun set over the fields he had fought so hard to restore, Daniel felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had only just begun, but he was ready for whatever came next. The ranch was his. The animals were thriving, and the land was alive with possibility. Daniel knew that he had found his true home, a place where dreams took root, where work and life were inseparable, and where every day brought the promise of new beginnings. Life on the ranch was far more demanding than Daniel had imagined, but it was also more rewarding. The first few months had given him a taste of the work involved, yet as the seasons changed, he realized that challenges came in endless forms. Every day required planning, energy, and attention, and every mistake had consequences. But for Daniel, the ranch was no longer just a dream, it was a responsibility. A place that depended on his care and dedication. He began to understand that the land, the animals, and the home he had built were intertwined, and that his actions affected the harmony of everything around him. The livestock was his first concern. Cows, horses, sheep, and chickens each had their own needs, and Daniel had to learn quickly how to meet them. Feeding them was not as simple as bringing food to the barn. He had to calculate portions, understand nutritional needs, and ensure that water was always clean and accessible. Some animals were stubborn or scared, making daily routines unpredictable. Horses sometimes refused to be led, cows wandered into areas they should not, and chickens were often missing from the coop at the most inconvenient times. Daniel learned patience in ways he had never known before. He discovered that rushing or getting frustrated only made things worse. and that observing carefully and responding calmly often brought better results. Fencing became one of Daniel's biggest challenges. Many of the fences on the property were old, broken, or leaning dangerously. A cow could easily wander into the wrong pasture. A horse could injure itself on loose boards, and a stray animal could cause havoc. Repairing fences required both skill and creativity. Daniel had to figure out which materials were still usable, how to reinforce weak areas, and how to build new sections that would last for years. The work was physically exhausting, often leaving him sore and tired by the end of the day. Yet, there was a sense of satisfaction in seeing a long stretch of sturdy fence standing where chaos had once reigned. It was a visible sign of progress and control over the land he had come to love. Weather became another constant challenge. Some days, the sun would beat down relentlessly, turning fields into dry patches that made it hard for crops to grow. On other days, storms would sweep through, bringing heavy rain, strong winds, and even hail. Daniel had to monitor the sky constantly, predicting how to protect his animals and crops from potential damage. He built shelters, reinforced barns, and learned techniques to keep water flowing to the right areas without flooding fields. Nature was unpredictable, but Daniel learned to adapt and respond with patience and resourcefulness. Each season taught him new lessons about resilience, planning, and respect for the natural world. Despite the hardships, there were moments of joy that made everything worthwhile. Early mornings became Daniel's favorite time of day. The sun would rise over the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was fresh and filled with the soft sounds of the farm, waking up birds chirping, livestock moving quietly, and the distant sound of a river flowing. Daniel often walked through the fields during these hours, feeling a deep connection to the land. He realized that while the work was difficult, the peace and beauty of the surroundings brought a sense of fulfillment that no city life could provide. These moments reminded him why he had chosen this life and strengthened his resolve to continue despite the challenges. As weeks turned into months, Daniel began to notice the small victories that came from consistent effort. A cow that had been sick regained its strength. Crops in one field began to flourish, and a section of the barn that had been unstable now stood solid and secure. These successes, though small, felt monumental. They were proof that hard work, patience, and dedication yielded tangible results. Daniel took pride in each achievement, celebrating quietly in his mind as he observed the progress. It was a reminder that growth, whether of the land, the animals, or himself, was a gradual process that required attention and care. Daniel also discovered the importance of learning from others. Neighbors who had lived on ranches for generations became invaluable sources of advice and support. They shared their experiences, taught him techniques he had not known, and sometimes even helped with heavy tasks. Daniel learned how to rotate pastures to keep soil fertile, how to identify common animal illnesses, and how to manage irrigation efficiently. Through these interactions, he realized that ranch life was not meant to be isolated. The sense of community, the willingness to share knowledge, and the mutual support among ranchers made the journey easier and more rewarding. These connections reminded Daniel that life was richer when shared, and that guidance from those who had walked the path before could prevent mistakes and accelerate growth. One of the most important lessons Daniel learned was patience. Ranch work rarely rewarded speed or force. Instead, it required steady effort, observation, and care. Animals did not respond to frustration, crops did not grow overnight, and weather could undo weeks of work in a single storm. Daniel had to learn to adapt, to plan carefully, and to accept that setbacks were part of the journey. Slowly, he realized that patience was not just a strategy, it was a mindset, a way of life that allowed him to persevere through challenges and celebrate even the smallest successes. By the middle of the year, Daniel had established a daily routine that balanced labor, observation, and reflection. Mornings were dedicated to tending animals, checking fences, and inspecting fields. Afternoons were spent repairing equipment, organizing storage, and planning for future work. Evenings were moments of quiet reflection, where Daniel could sit on the porch, watch the sunset, and think about the progress he had made. It was a rhythm that grounded him, providing structure and meaning to each day. Over time, this routine became second nature, and Daniel began to feel a deep sense of competence and confidence in his abilities. The challenges were not always predictable. One day, a sudden storm caused a fence to collapse, allowing some cows to wander into a neighboring property. Daniel rushed out in the rain, repairing the fence and guiding the animals back safely. It was exhausting and stressful, but the sense of accomplishment at resolving the situation reinforced his belief that he could handle unexpected problems. Another time, a young foal became sick, requiring constant care and monitoring. Daniel spent days tending to it, learning about its needs, and adjusting feeding schedules. When the foal finally regained health and strength, Daniel felt a profound sense of joy. These experiences taught him that ranch life demanded vigilance, adaptability, and an unwavering commitment to the well-being of all living things on the property. Despite the relentless work, Daniel found that the ranch offered unexpected joys and moments of inspiration. He discovered the beauty of simple pleasures, watching a calf take its first steps, seeing a garden flourish after weeks of care, or hearing the soft cluck of chickens settling for the night. These small wonders reminded him why he had pursued this life and gave him energy to continue despite the difficulties. The ranch was more than just a workplace. It was a living, breathing entity that responded to care and attention, and in return, offered satisfaction, peace, and a sense of accomplishment. As the year progressed, Daniel noticed not just the growth of the ranch, but also his own transformation. He had become stronger, more patient, and more resilient. He had learned to solve problems creatively, manage time efficiently, and anticipate challenges before they arose. He had grown more empathetic, not just toward animals, but toward people and the world around him. The ranch had become a mirror of his own journey, reflecting the effort, care, and dedication he put into every aspect of his life. By the end of this period, Daniel had achieved a sense of balance. The ranch, once a wild and untamed property, was now organized, productive, and thriving. The animals were healthy, the fields were fertile, and the structures were solid and functional. More importantly, Daniel had grown as a person. He had learned that success was not measured by speed or shortcuts, but by consistent effort, patience, and a willingness to face challenges head-on. The ranch had taught him lessons that no classroom or city life could offer: lessons about responsibility, resilience, and the rewards of hard work. Looking back on the months of labor, Daniel realized that the ranch had become a part of him. Every fence he had repaired, every animal he had cared for, and every crop he had nurtured reflected his dedication and love for this life. The challenges had been many, but the triumphs, small or large, made every effort worthwhile. He knew that the journey was far from over. There would always be storms, broken fences, sick animals, and unpredictable setbacks. Yet, Daniel was ready to face them with determination, patience, and hope. The ranch had become more than a property. It was a home, a teacher, and a testament to his ability to build, care, and grow. Life on the ranch had become Daniel's normal routine. The land was thriving, the animals were healthy, and the work, though demanding, gave him a sense of purpose he had never felt in the city. Yet, just as he began to feel fully in control of his world, life offered a surprise that would change everything. One crisp morning, Daniel received a phone call that brought both joy and wonder. He was going to be a father. The news filled him with emotions he could not fully describe. Excitement, happiness, nervousness, and a deep sense of responsibility all intertwined, creating a feeling that was at once exhilarating and overwhelming. At first, Daniel was unsure how this new chapter would fit into his life on the ranch. He had dedicated himself entirely to his work, focusing on restoring the land, caring for animals, and maintaining the property. The idea of parenthood brought a new level of responsibility, one that could not be measured in hours or tasks, but in love, attention, and lifelong commitment. He spent long nights thinking about how he would balance these two worlds: the ranch, which demanded constant care, and the life of a child, which required patience, guidance, and emotional presence. Daniel began preparing not only for the arrival of his child but also for the ways in which the ranch could become a nurturing environment for family life. He imagined the small hands of a child touching the soft fur of a calf, learning the rhythm of feeding chickens, or helping to gather vegetables from the garden. The ranch, once a personal sanctuary, would soon be a place of shared experiences, learning, and growth. He realized that fatherhood was not just about raising a child, it was about teaching, guiding, and creating a life filled with love, responsibility, and connection. The months leading up to the birth were both joyful and challenging. Daniel had to continue managing the ranch, often rising before dawn to care for animals and tend the fields, while also attending medical appointments and preparing the home for a newborn. The work was physically exhausting, yet every task seemed lighter because of the anticipation of new life. He spent hours organizing the house, making sure that the spaces were safe, clean, and welcoming. He built a small nursery in a quiet corner of the ranch house, painting walls, assembling furniture, and filling it with warmth. Each detail, no matter how small, was a way for him to express his love and readiness to become a parent. As the months passed, Daniel found himself learning a new type of patience. Caring for animals and maintaining the land had taught him endurance, but caring for a child required emotional patience in a way he had never known. He thought about the lessons he would teach his child, the value of hard work, the importance of kindness, and the joy of living in harmony with nature. He realized that fatherhood would not be a single achievement but an ongoing journey, one that would require dedication, empathy, and understanding every single day. The ranch itself became a place of reflection. Daniel often walked through the fields at sunset, imagining his child growing up alongside the animals and the land. He pictured the child learning to ride a horse, plant seeds, or feed a calf. The thought filled him with a deep sense of fulfillment. The ranch was no longer only his dream. It was a living environment where he could nurture life, teach values, and create memories that would last a lifetime. Each step he took across the fields reminded him that life, much like the land, required care, patience, and attention to flourish. Daniel also began to reflect on the lessons he had learned in the past year. Ranch life had taught him responsibility, resilience, and problem-solving. It had shown him the rewards of hard work and the beauty of small victories. Now, he realized that these lessons would be essential in fatherhood. Just as he had learned to care for livestock and maintain the land, he would need to care for and nurture a child, guiding them through life with patience, love, and encouragement. The connection between his work and his future role as a parent became clear. Both required dedication, attention, and a deep respect for life. Friends and neighbors, learning of Daniel's upcoming fatherhood, offered advice, support, and encouragement. Some shared stories of raising children on ranches, while others offered practical tips for balancing work and family. Daniel listened attentively, grateful for their wisdom. He realized that just as he had relied on the knowledge of experienced ranchers, he could rely on the guidance of those who had navigated parenthood before him. This network of support reminded him that life's greatest challenges were easier to face when shared with others, and that seeking advice was a strength rather than a weakness. As the due date approached, Daniel's anticipation grew. He found himself more introspective, thinking about the kind of father he wanted to be. He wanted to teach his child about the importance of nature, the value of hard work, and the joy of simple pleasures. He wanted to create a home filled with love, laughter, and learning. The ranch, with its wide-open spaces and thriving life, became a perfect setting for these lessons. Daniel envisioned teaching his child how to care for animals, understand the land, and appreciate the beauty and challenges of life on a ranch. There were moments of nervousness as well. Daniel worried about balancing his work with the demands of parenthood. He wondered how he would manage late-night feedings, unexpected animal emergencies, and the constant responsibilities of raising a child. Yet, in these moments of doubt, he reminded himself of the resilience he had built over the past year. If he could restore a neglected ranch, care for a wide range of animals, and face unpredictable challenges with patience and dedication, he could face fatherhood with the same determination, The skills and lessons he had learned on the land were preparing him for this new, deeply personal challenge. Finally, the day arrived when Daniel became a father. Holding his newborn child for the first time, he felt a profound connection unlike anything he had ever experienced. The tiny hands, the soft breath, and the gentle warmth created an instant bond that was both humbling and empowering. In that moment, Daniel realized that life had given him not only a beautiful property to care for, but also a new life to nurture. The ranch, the animals, and the land were part of one world, and now, his child would be a part of it too. The responsibilities of fatherhood and ranch life intertwined, creating a life filled with meaning, love, and purpose. In the days and weeks that followed, Daniel adapted to this new reality. He learned to manage night feedings and animal care simultaneously. He adjusted his schedule to ensure that both the ranch and his child received attention. He discovered the beauty of shared routines, morning walks with the child in a stroller alongside the animals, afternoons spent repairing fences while the child played safely nearby, and evenings on the porch watching sunsets together. The balance was delicate but deeply rewarding. Daniel realized that parenthood was not a separate part of life. It became part of every action, every decision, and every moment on the ranch. Daniel also reflected on the lessons he wanted to impart to his child. The ranch had taught him about responsibility, patience, and resilience. He wanted to pass these values on, showing that hard work and care bring rewards, that challenges can be overcome with perseverance, and that love and respect for life are essential. The land, the animals, and the routines of ranch life became tools for teaching important life skills. Daniel understood that fatherhood was a lifelong journey, just like ranching, full of challenges, surprises, and moments of pure joy. As months turned into the first year of his child's life, Daniel noticed the ways in which fatherhood transformed him. He became more thoughtful, more patient, and more aware of the consequences of his actions. He learned to slow down, to observe, and to respond with care. The ranch, once a place of personal achievement and solitude, became a shared space of learning, growth, and connection. Daniel realized that life, much like the land he had worked so hard to restore, required nurturing, attention, and patience to flourish. Through the laughter, cries, and milestones of his child's early life, Daniel found a deeper sense of purpose. He understood that the ranch was no longer just a dream, it was a home, a place of growth, and a foundation for family life. The work he had done, the lessons he had learned, and the community he had built all contributed to creating a safe, loving environment for his child. Fatherhood was not just a role, it was a new way of living, a way to connect with life, nature, and the future in the most profound sense. Daniel often reflected on how his life had changed in a short span of time. From the excitement of buying a neglected ranch, to the challenges of restoring it, and now to the joy of becoming a father, each stage had taught him resilience, patience, and gratitude. He realized that life was unpredictable, full of both hard work and unexpected joys, yet, by embracing each moment, he could create a life of meaning, love, and fulfillment. The ranch and his child together symbolized the balance between responsibility and reward, labor and love, struggle and joy. In quiet moments, Daniel would sit on the porch, watching his child sleep and the animals grazing peacefully in the fields. The sun would set behind the hills, casting golden light across the land he had nurtured. In those moments, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He understood that the journey had not been easy, but every challenge had prepared him for this life. The ranch had taught him lessons that applied not only to land and livestock but also to love, patience, and family. Daniel knew that the path ahead would bring more challenges, but he felt ready to face them, supported by the strength, wisdom, and joy he had gained through ranching and fatherhood. Time on the ranch moved forward with a gentle rhythm, yet Daniel felt as though the days were fuller than ever. The routines he had established, once centered solely around animals and the land, now included the soft laughter, curious questions, and tiny footsteps of his child. The ranch, which had once been a place of personal growth and hard work, had now become a home filled with love, learning, and shared experience. Daniel often reflected on how far he had come from dreaming of owning a neglected property, to nurturing a thriving land, and now raising a child within it. Each stage of his life seemed to connect, teaching him lessons about responsibility, patience, and the joy of creating something lasting. With the passing seasons, the ranch became a place where both Daniel and his child could grow together. He would take early mornings to feed the animals, sometimes carrying his child in a sling, or letting them toddle carefully beside him, holding onto his hand. The child's laughter echoed across the fields, blending with the gentle sounds of nature, the lowing of cows, the chirping of birds, and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. These moments reminded Daniel that the ranch was more than just a place of work. It was a space for connection, learning, and the creation of lifelong memories. He understood that the land, the animals, and the routines they followed together would teach his child lessons that books never could. As the child grew, Daniel found ways to involve them safely in ranch life. They would collect eggs from the chicken coop, help water plants, and even watch as animals were cared for. Daniel was careful to make each activity both educational and fun, fostering a sense of curiosity and respect for life. The ranch became a living classroom where the child could learn about responsibility, patience, and empathy. Watching their small hands mimic his actions, Daniel felt a deep pride. He realized that the work he had poured into the land now served a dual purpose: sustaining life and nurturing the next generation. The seasons brought both challenges and rewards. Harsh winters tested their endurance, while spring and summer brought abundance and growth. Daniel found that he approached these challenges differently now. Before fatherhood, setbacks had been stressful, even discouraging. Now, he faced them with a calm determination, knowing that his child's well-being was intertwined with the care of the ranch. Storms, broken fences, or sick animals were no longer just problems. They were lessons in perseverance, adaptability, and courage. Daniel's sense of purpose had grown, rooted not only in his personal ambitions but in the life of another human being who depended on him. As the child began to understand language and movement, Daniel took pride in the small ways they engaged with the ranch. Simple questions like, "Why is the cow eating grass?" or "How does the water get to the plants?" became opportunities for teaching and conversation. He explained patiently, using simple words and examples, fostering curiosity and observation. These interactions brought Daniel joy, as he could see the child's mind, learning, questioning, and discovering. He realized that parenthood was a journey of guidance and discovery, just as much as ranch life had been a journey of learning and growth for him. Daniel also reflected on the friendships he had built over the years. Neighbors who had helped him when he first arrived continued to be part of their lives. They shared in milestones, offered advice, and sometimes joined in celebrations or work on the ranch. These relationships became even more meaningful now that Daniel's child was growing up among people who cared for and supported them. The sense of community reinforced the idea that life, like the ranch, thrived on collaboration, trust, and mutual care. Daniel was grateful for this network, knowing that his child would grow up learning the values of kindness, cooperation, and respect for others. With time, the ranch itself reflected years of effort and dedication. Crops flourished, pastures were lush and green, and animals were healthy and happy. The structures on the property were strong and well-maintained. Daniel often walked across the land at sunset, pausing to observe the fields and animals, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. Yet, the true reward was not just the physical success of the ranch. It was the harmony he had cultivated between the land, the animals, and his family. The ranch had become a living testament to his dedication, patience, and love. Daniel took special care to ensure that his child grew up appreciating both the beauty and responsibility of life. He encouraged exploration while teaching safety, instilled curiosity while modeling respect for animals, and celebrated accomplishments while emphasizing the value of effort. The child learned that hard work had its rewards, that setbacks were opportunities to learn, and that every living thing required care and attention. Watching this growth, Daniel realized that the lessons he had learned on the ranch were now being passed on in the most meaningful way possible. Fatherhood had also transformed Daniel personally. He noticed that he had grown more patient, compassionate, and mindful. The challenges he faced on the ranch, combined with the responsibilities of raising a child, had taught him balance. He had learned to manage stress, prioritize effectively, and find joy in small moments. Simple acts, a child's smile, a calf taking its first steps, a field flourishing after weeks of care brought profound satisfaction. Daniel understood that life's greatest rewards often came from patience, effort, and love, rather than speed or perfection. Community events and traditions became more meaningful with a child in his life. Daniel attended local fairs, animal exhibitions, and seasonal gatherings, often sharing the experience with his child. The child watched, participated, and slowly learned about the importance of tradition, family, and community values. Daniel felt proud to share these experiences, knowing that the combination of ranch life and community involvement would teach resilience, empathy, and social responsibility. These moments were more than leisure, they were lessons in life, culture, and belonging. As the child grew older, Daniel reflected on the broader legacy he was creating. The ranch was not just a property or a source of income. It was a home, a teacher, and a place of growth. He wanted his child to understand the value of nurturing life, respecting nature, and working with patience and determination. He realized that the work he had done over the years, rebuilding fences, restoring fields, and caring for animals, was now part of a larger story. It was a story of continuity, care, and the passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. There were, of course, moments of exhaustion and challenge. Caring for both a ranch and a child required constant attention, flexibility, and energy. There were nights when an animal needed help, or the child was restless. Daniel learned to manage these moments with calm and creativity, developing routines that balanced care for both. He understood that perfection was impossible, but consistency, love, and effort were what truly mattered. The child's laughter, curiosity, and progress were daily reminders that all the effort was worthwhile. Looking back, Daniel often marveled at the journey. He remembered the early days of struggle, the long hours of hard work, and the uncertainty he had faced when he first bought the neglected ranch. He reflected on the lessons he had learned from the land, animals, neighbors, and now from fatherhood. Each challenge had strengthened him, each small victory had encouraged him, and each moment of joy had reminded him why he had chosen this path. Daniel realized that life was not a series of isolated events, but a connected journey where work, love, and care combined to create meaning. The ranch had grown from a dream into a thriving, living home, full of life and energy. Daniel's child was growing alongside it, learning to value the land, animals, and work ethic that Daniel had cultivated. Together, they experienced the changing seasons, the beauty of nature, and the satisfaction of accomplishment. Daniel understood that this was more than success, it was fulfillment. He had created a life that combined purpose, joy, and responsibility, where each day brought opportunities to learn, grow, and love. In quiet moments, Daniel would stand on a hill overlooking the fields, his child playing nearby, animals grazing peacefully, and the sun casting golden light across the land. He felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey from a city life to ranch life, from dreaming of a property to restoring it, and from bachelorhood to fatherhood, had taught him lessons that were priceless. He understood the connection between effort and reward, responsibility and growth, and love and fulfillment. The ranch was no longer just a place, it was a legacy, a home, and a foundation for generations to come. Daniel's story became an inspiration not only to his neighbors and friends but also to anyone who visited the ranch. It was a story of resilience, dedication, and the beauty of living life with purpose. He had faced challenges with patience, learned from setbacks, and celebrated victories, both large and small. More importantly, he had embraced the joy of creating life both on the land and in his child, demonstrating that true fulfillment comes from nurturing, caring, and loving wholeheartedly. As the years passed, the ranch continued to thrive. Crops flourished, animals multiplied, and the structures stood strong. Daniel's child grew up understanding the rhythm of life on a ranch, the importance of responsibility, and the value of hard work. Together, they celebrated successes, weathered challenges, and shared moments of pure joy. The ranch had become a place of learning, love, and growth, a home where dreams were nurtured, life was respected, and every day offered new opportunities to create meaning. Daniel often smiled when he reflected on how much had changed. The journey had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had brought him the greatest rewards imaginable: a thriving ranch, a healthy family, and a life filled with purpose and joy. He understood that the true measure of success was not wealth, fame, or recognition, but the ability to create a life of meaning, to nurture growth, and to leave a legacy for future generations. His story was a testament to the power of dreams, the importance of hard work, and the extraordinary fulfillment that comes from love, care, and perseverance.